Hello and welcome to VAD Inspires, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate to you the importance of using exposure therapy when it comes to rewiring your brain for anxiety. And this is the strictly personal part 19, and on the previous part of this strictly personal series I demonstrated with my PowerPoint presentation how you can use a simple worksheet in order to start to map out your anxious patterns. And on this video I'm going to demonstrate to you how you can use exposure therapy to start to rewire your anxious brain, because exposure is a very critical important thing when it comes to anxiety. It's like traveling on a well-known highway, and then on that highway the rewiring represents like an exit ramp. On a well-known highway that you know, there's an exit ramp. If that exit ramp is used consistently and practiced consistently, your brain learns to respond in a different way. Ergo, learn to respond by using the off ramp when you experience those anxious, eliciting situations. So, when it comes to overcoming our fears, there are examples of people who have overcome their fears. You know, people who work at skyscrapers, cleaning the windows of skyscrapers 1,000 feet high, the skydiving. Even when we learn to swim or learn to jump or learn to jump out of an airplane, you know, skydiving, you know, these are things that we do because we have overcome our anxiety to some extent. So we use that as a benchmark to understand that overcoming anxiety is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. And two of the exposure therapies here that I want to talk about is the systematic desensitization and the flooding. As you can tell from the phraseology of both of them, the systematic desensitization is the gradual exposure, deliberately exposing yourself to an anxious situation in a hierarchical way. For example, if you are scared of going to the mall, you know, put that in a hierarchy. Dressing up, what's the level of anxiety when you start to dress up to go to the mall? You know, when you put on your shoes, what's the level of anxiety? What's the level of the anxiety when you pick up your car keys? What's the level of the anxiety when you're driving towards the mall? You know, that's the systematic desensitization steps that you can think of when you are practicing your exposure using the anxious pattern that we've mapped out on the previous strictly personal. And the other one is the in vivo flooding. In vivo flooding is just throwing yourself right into the deep end, you know, sink or swim kind of idea. And many people used to think that, you know, panic attack might kill them if they expose themselves in that manner. But panic attack hasn't killed anyone yet. And it's a fear response that your brain is over exaggerating the situation in a way that it's trying to save you, but actually activating for no reason. So in vivo flooding is also important, but of course systematic desensitization sounds more approachable, but both of them work like a trick, right? And first is to imagine yourself in that situation. Imagine yourself in that situation when you are thinking about those situations that elicit your anxiety or your anxious response. Imagine yourself in those situations, and then schedule times to expose yourself gradually or all the way, because the path to less suffering is through suffering. I think it was Jordan Peterson that said that, because for you to get better, you cannot run away from what's gonna help you get better. The solution is much more farther when you avoid, when we try to run away. But when we face our fears, we learn how to handle them. And the solution to the world is not to make it less safe, although that's a worthy goal, but it's to teach people to be much more confident about themselves, to be much more equipped to handle the errors of the world that are inevitable. And anxiety is one of them. So it is that something that we can understand how to handle through using this exposure therapy. You know, when you face your fears, you expand your comfort zone. When you face your fears, you learn something new that your brain didn't know at the time. And that's the capability of the neuroplasticity of the brain that it's able to regenerate itself, it's able to grow, to expand, if we put ourselves in a situation where we have to grow and expand. And that's this exposure therapy situations. And when you are trying to intentionally put yourself in an anxiety provoking situations, which is what exposure therapy is, make sure you have enough confidence in yourself. Make sure you have enough confidence that you're going to follow through. Because when you put yourself in an anxiety provoking situation and you left before your anxiety calmed down, you actually strengthen your anxious pattern. You make it even much more difficult, because what you're telling your brain is, when it gets too tough, we run away. And guess what? The next time, it's not even gonna reach to the extent that you were able to withhold, and it's gonna tell you to run away quickly. So it's important to follow through once you commit and once you put yourself in those anxious provoking situations that used to scare you, or maybe even your thoughts, or maybe something that you've been dreading to do. Follow through. A small step of action kills fear, because fear is not courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing things despite fear. And remember the priority we talked about on the previous video, which is the fact that you don't need to cure every single fear. Even at that, there are some fears that you don't have to cure, or can be detrimental when you start to act like you're not afraid of that. For example, when a car is burning down the highway or burning down the street, you might want to step out of the way. That's a healthy fear. Those fears are important. Those fears guide us. Those fears lead us out of danger. But of course, then the anxiety pattern is when the brain takes that survival instinct too far. And now we have to reprogram our mind, reprogram and rewire our brain in a way that we can then teach it to notice what's fearful but not life-threatening, and what's actually life-threatening in terms of something we ought to avoid. And finding situations, for example, if you are afraid of airplanes and you are not a traveler, or you can pretty much go everywhere you want to go without using an airplane, there's no use targeting that kind of anxiety unless that's important to you. But if you are someone who, for example, have to sell stuff, and you are anxious about approaching prospects or approaching customers or talking to customers, this is important to you. If you don't sell, you don't eat, you don't get commissions, you don't get paid at your work. So this is to just exemplify to you the importance of working with the part of your brain or part of your life, that you need this wiring on. And that's what's gonna make the difference. That's what's gonna make the most impact on your life. Because when you start to understand that you can overcome your fears, it will prompt you to question most of the things that you think you cannot do. And exposure is important. Exposure with response prevention is especially important. For example, if you are a germophobia, touching things makes you want to wash your hands all the time, try touching that thing without washing your hand. And when you are experiencing that urge, that impulse to wash your hand, calm yourself through it using the deep breathing practice, or focusing on your heartbeat, being in the present, and try not to do that which your brain is expecting you to do in order to reinforce those anxious patterns. And practicing frequently is essential. And it's not to say that you're going to practice, it's to schedule the practices that you are trying to do. So in that way, when you are about to do them, you know that you have committed yourself to doing it and you're going to flow through it. And the consistency and the frequency and the amount that we expose ourselves to those anxious and anxiety-provoking situations, and we don't run away, the more that we build those neural pathways, that off-ramp that we need in order to understand what we have to do to unwire our anxious brains. So pay attention to your thoughts, pay attention to your feeling, pay attention to the things that you're doing, so that way you can understand what's happening to you when you are experiencing these anxious patterns. So to quickly recap, exposure is crucial when it comes to rewiring our brain, rewiring our anxious brain, because through exposure we learn, through facing our fears we overcome. The path through suffering, the path through less suffering is through suffering. For things to get better, we have to get better. And then using one of the two, systematic desensitization, a slow gradual process or in vivo flooding, which is just throwing yourself right into the deep end. But each time to make sure that we actually follow through and not leave the situation until we have calmed down, experiencing the said situation. And then the last point of scheduling times for this exposure, scheduling times to do it consistently so we can create that off ramp. And as always, thanks for watching. Be great, subscribe for more, and follow more to stay inspired. And don't forget to check out the Strictly Personal playlist that could be hovering on top of this video, or you can see another video, a short inspirational short series that will be playing after this. Thank you.